Phylum Bryophyta. These are the mosses. They typically grow in dense mats and damp, shady locations with upright stems forming a fluffy texture that effectively retains moisture, kind of like a sponge. Um, they're composed of single unbranching stems with many simplified leaves along the length of the stem. And the reproductive structure, archegonia or antheridia, are produced at the tips of each stem. The sporophyte phase of mosses is physically dependent upon gametophyte tissues, so the sporophyte stalk grows directly out of the stem of the female gametophyte. And if you notice this patch on the right here, it represents a collection of many stems, and these are the gametophyte generation, but there are tiny stalks with light colored caps on them, and that is the sporophyte generation growing out of each moss stem. So again, on the picture on the left here, you can see a single strand of moss representing the gametophyte generation, and this includes a stalk with simplified leaves. And in the second picture, you can see rhizoids at the base of the stalk, which are similar to roots and provide stability. The moss gametophytes at sexual maturity are pictured in the third picture here, and this picture shows female gametophyte stalks with archegonia at the tips, even though they're difficult to see. The fourth picture here shows male gametophyte at sexual maturity, which have these antheridia at the tips of each of their stalks, which are a little easier to see. They're kind of flower shaped. So the sporophyte generation is pretty easy to identify from the gametophyte generation in mosses. We covered it a couple slides ago, but again, the sporophyte generation is a stalk that grows from the tip of the female gametophyte, and the sporophyte is diploid or 2N and produces spores. The gametophyte is haploid or 1N and is photosynthetic. So the gametophyte is green and the sporophyte is typically a duller green or brown color. And the gametophyte is going through photosynthesis and using that energy to grow and produce the sporophyte and spores within it. Another image here to show the difference between sporophyte and gametophyte in mosses, and a close-up of the sporophyte itself. So moss sporophytes are light green as they bud out of the tip of the gametophyte, but turn brown as they mature. So they're not using photosynthesis, they're getting their energy from the gametophyte. And at the top of this stalk is a capsule. The calyptra is a covering over this capsule, and this capsule has an operculum at the tip of it, which pops off when the time is right under specific environmental conditions, and the spores within it are dispersed with the teeth of the peristome, which is a structure beneath the operculum that helps distribute them across a longer period of time. Here we've got the sporophyte capsule just under a microscope, so you can see the clusters of spores arranged within it. All right, so the sporic life cycle in Bryophyta, the mosses. We're going to start with spores being distributed or dispersed in the wind. And again, they're coming from the sporophyte, the mature sporophyte, which has come from the mature gametophyte, but we'll cover that later on in the life cycle. If these spores land in a suitable environment, they will germinate and develop a protonema, which is just a strand of cells growing out of it. Um, they're undergoing mitosis to grow the and eventually will reach maturity. Here you can see a mature female moss stalk and a mature male moss stalk with the antheridia at the tip. So the antheridia produce sperm, and when conditions are right and it's wet enough or it's raining, the sperm will use their flagella to swim through water and meet the egg in the archegonium of the mature female gametophyte or mature female stalk. And this is where fertilization occurs in the archegonium. A single cell diploid zygote is formed, which begins the sporophyte generation. Again, sporophyte is always diploid. So the diploid zygote undergoes many cycles of mitosis, growing from a single-celled zygote to a multicellular embryo, and this is all within the protected structure of the archegonium. The diploid's zygote grows into a mature sporophyte directly out of the gametophyte tissue, out of the female gametophyte tissue. And upon reaching maturity, the sporophyte forms specialized structures called sporangium that produce and protect developing spores. In the case of mosses, the sporangium is a capsule that develops at the top of the sporophyte stalk and helps distribute these spores. So first, the sporangium undergoes meiosis because it is a diploid sporophyte. It needs to reduce its ploidy number to produce haploid spores. After this step of meiosis, the encapsulated haploid spores are released into the wind, and if they land in a suitable location, they'll germinate and grow, which begins the gametophyte generation where we started. Okay, now I am going to draw this out for you guys, and we are going to start with the spores. The spores are haploid or one N. And spores will undergo mitosis to grow into, well, if they land in a suitable location, they'll undergo mitosis to grow into a mature gametophyte, or the moss sprig or stalk that we discussed earlier. The first thing that grows from the first structure to grow from the spore itself is protonema, which is that first strand of cells that arises or that germinates, and later on this will grow into a mature gametophyte, which is the stalk with leaf-like structures in a moss, as well as some rhizoids that help anchor it to the substrate. Now, there is a male and a female structure, the or male and female gametophyte, which have different reproductive structures at the tip of each stalk. So, for the male, we have antheridia housing the sperm, and for the female gametophyte, we have archegonia housing the eggs. Remember, the gametophyte is the haploid part of the moss life cycle. There's a star-like structure at the top of the female gametophyte, and at the top of the male, there's some sort of like flower kind of structure. This is the archegonia and antheridia, and when it rains or water enters the environment, sperm are able to travel able to travel from the antheridia through the water using their flagella to the archegonia, and in the archegonia, the egg is fertilized. Fertilization leaves us with a single-celled diploid zygote, and this is the beginning of the sporophyte generation. This diploid zygote goes through mitosis to grow down into the actual gametophyte to get nutrients from the moss stalk, from the female gametophyte, and it grows a stalk up as well, typically not green or a dull green, because it's using the photosynthesis from the gametophyte for energy and not making its own, with a sporangia capsule or spore capsule on the top. This spore capsule will have a sheath on it that actually is part of the gametophyte that's been ripped off as it grew up. And it also has a cap on it. So just want to clarify that the sporophyte is undergoing mitosis to grow into this stalk and fully mature. The mature sporophyte is this whole structure. And I'll just remind you here that it is a diploid. And the when conditions are right, the calyptra falls off, which is this outer covering. The operculum pops off, which is this inner cap, and peristome teeth distribute spores. Spores are distributed in the wind. And just a reminder, to get from sporophyte to spores, we have to do meiosis because the spores are haploid and the sporophyte is diploid. To wrap things up, if the spores end up in a suitable location, they'll undergo mitosis to grow into the mature gametophyte.